So really quickly, can you do me a favor and spell your name and say where you're from and how old you are?
So my name's Elise Runnels. You spell it Elise. And then my last name is Runnels. And I'm 17 and I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah.
Good. Okay, now let's do that again, but without you spelling your name.
Okay. Can you hear me all right? I don't have headphones or anything.
No, you sound perfect.
Okay, cool. So my name's Elise Runnels and I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'm 17 years old.
Awesome. Okay, so how's the coronavirus affected you?
So I was in Chile up until March, the middle of March, and I had to leave 4 months early for my exchange year. And so that was a pretty big effect that it had on me and my family, and it cut a life that I had short, which is sad.
How wait, hold on. Why were you in Chile?
I was in Chile for an exchange year, so I wanted to learn Spanish, and I had really never been to South America before, so I wanted to be a part of the culture. And I would have been there for a year, but I was there for 8 months. And I was in a small town, and yeah, small town outside of a big city. It was nice.
Um, how was your experience before the coronavirus hit?
It was really calm. Even when we knew about it in China, people weren't super concerned about it. They were mostly like, oh, it'll blow over, it'll be fine. And it was really calm. Like, people were still going to the beach and relaxing, and there was no fear, there was nothing. It was really calm.
Awesome. So how was the coronavirus dealt with in Chile?
So the coronavirus started in a small city or a small town outside of the big city. So what they did is, when the first positive came in, they shut down the whole town. And if you left your house, you got arrested. So it was a big deal, and they quarantined it immediately. So as soon as a case popped up, that entire area was under quarantine and they weren't allowed to leave. So that's how.
Do you know what they're doing right now?
So right now, Chile's divided up into regions, and they've closed off regions. So you can't travel regionally. They have a toque de queda, which is like a curfew. So you're not allowed to leave your house after 10, and you're not allowed to leave before 6. And if you leave your house for something that's non-essential, you can get arrested. And there's no more international flights out. I actually received an email from the embassy saying that the last flight out of Chile internationally was a couple weeks ago. So they were completely under quarantine. Nobody can leave, nobody can come in.
Did you deal with any of these new regulations, I guess, while you were there?
I left the day that they started the regulations. So I was there. They were taking temperatures when you went into the airport, so I had to take my temperature. And when I took my plane to the big airport, they took my temperature. There was a few extra precautions. People were wearing masks. I had to wear a mask in the airport. Yeah, so there were small things, but it wasn't like a big adjustments like the curfew and regional and international shutdowns. I didn't deal with any of that.
I know that there's like a lot of students not from the US that were in your program. Do you know how they're dealing with it and how it's affecting them?
So my parents pulled me out of the organization, and the other kids, they went home a week after I did. So the entire program shut down and everybody had to go home. But the Italians, because the Italy was already quarantined, they were stuck in a big city in like a hotel for about a month and a half. So I imagine for them that's pretty awful, being in a town. They weren't allowed to be with their host families anymore. And I know that the people who were in Europe and not in Italy and who could go home, they were happy to go home, but there was a lot of things that they had to deal with through the airports. A lot of them lost their bags and are never getting their bags back. Just small things like that, because of everything that the coronavirus has affected, like non-essential jobs, things like that you can't work, and a lot of things like small things that we take for granted like that.
Yeah. Well, that was a good answer. When you compare the US reaction to the coronavirus to Chile, do you think that they're similar or do you think that both can change or do you think they can learn from each other?
So I think they're pretty different because as soon as cases started popping up in Chile, they immediately went into quarantine. It was a little bit more authoritarian, if you know what I'm saying. Like if you leave the streets, you got arrested. I mean, that's a strict way of doing it, but it worked, right? Because Chile only has 9,000 cases, whereas here we have tons. We have tons of cases, and I think that the US was a little bit more delayed because I know that in New York, when they had 16,000 cases, they were still encouraging social distancing, but they weren't actually enforcing quarantine, which I think also leads to the fact that New York has so many cases and they don't have enough supplies. And it's just awful in New York right now. I think it's because of that. And I think that Chile could also learn from the US in a way that like they don't have to be so strict about it and maybe be a little bit more lenient, but I think that the way they reacted was a good way to react. Though you have to remember that Chile is way smaller than the US. So it's
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, a little different.
Um, so now that you're back in the US, what are you doing?
So I've been trying to keep myself busy because I don't have school. So I've been doing some online SAT courses, ACT courses, trying some new hobbies. I've been doing a lot of cooking, gardening, taking my dogs on walk, just simple things that I can do to keep myself from freaking out.
So what are you doing to stay safe from the virus?
Using a lot of hand sanitizer, um, mask. I use a mask if I go out to like a grocery store or something. I use masks for that. Um, Also just like regularly washing my hands. Even though I'm in the house, you never know, right? Gloves sometimes, just simple things, hoping that but like my parents have to be extra careful. Like I don't have to be, I have to be super careful too, but like they're doctors, right? So they could bring it home, which
Mhm.
is a little bit more scary because like my dad is sometimes dealing with COVID patients.
Yeah,
So he has to be a little bit more cautious than me. So he's always wearing a mask and things like that.
interesting. Thank you. Thank you for helping me out. I think that's it. But did you hear? Okay, hold on. Let me pause the recording.